This happened in a small village lost amidst dense forests. The residents were always friendly and welcoming, but there was one place no one dared to go. A few kilometers from the village stood an old, abandoned barn, which seemed to be soaked in darkness and mystery. The locals avoided it, but there was always someone who decided to check out what was hidden there. That's what happened to a young man named Jackson. He was one of those who didn't believe in old legends and thought that all these stories were just tales to scare children. Jackson was a tall, strong guy with a sharp mind and an insatiable curiosity. When he heard from the old men at the local bar that people supposedly disappeared in the barn, he couldn't resist the urge to check it out for himself. On the day he decided to go there, the weather was cloudy and windy. Jackson gathered everything he might need: a flashlight, a knife, and a bottle of water. None of his friends wanted to go with him. They all knew something was wrong with that barn. The road to the barn was narrow and winding. The closer he got, the stronger the feeling grew that someone was watching him. When he finally reached the place, the barn loomed before him like a ghost from the past. Its wooden walls were covered in moss, the roof had rotted, and several planks seemed ready to fall. Jackson didn't hesitate for a second. He pushed the creaking door open and stepped inside. It was dark inside, and the air was filled with the smell of mold and old, rotting wood. The flashlight illuminated only a small part of the enormous space in front of him. He saw old, broken tools, crumbling wooden crates, and thick cobwebs hanging everywhere. But something else caught his attention: a faint whisper coming from a dark corner of the barn. Jackson strained to listen, and his heart began to race. The whisper was barely audible, but the words seemed strange and ancient. He took a step forward, pointing his flashlight towards the source of the sound, and then a shadow flitted past him. He froze. Not out of fear, but because something inside him told him that the shadow was real, not an illusion. He slowly turned, but saw nothing. The whisper grew louder, and now he could make out the words: "Come here, we are waiting for you." Jackson took another step forward, and then the floor beneath his feet began to shake. For a moment, it seemed to him that everything around him was breathing, as if the barn were a living being. He felt cold sweat on his forehead, but decided to continue. When he approached the place from where the whisper came, he saw something strange. A circle was carved on the floor, inside of which were inscribed incomprehensible symbols. The whisper stopped, and a terrifying silence fell. At that moment, Jackson realized he was not alone. He turned towards the exit, but his way was blocked by a dark figure. A person, if it was a person, stood in the shadows, their face impossible to discern. Jackson felt his heart stop, and then begin to pound furiously. The figure slowly moved towards him, and with each step, Jackson felt increasing pressure on his shoulders, as if an invisible force was pressing him down. The flashlight in his hand shook, and the light flickered, then went out completely. He was plunged into complete darkness. In desperation, Jackson tried to turn the flashlight back on, but to no avail. Then he did the only thing he could: he started running. But the door through which he entered had vanished. The barn seemed to have swallowed him up, and now he was trapped. Heavy footsteps echoed in the darkness, getting closer and closer. Jackson felt his breath catch, and his body was overtaken by panic. He fell to his knees, feeling the floor beneath him begin to crack. At the last moment, he realized he had made a mistake by entering here, but it was too late. The ground beneath him opened up, and Jackson felt himself being pulled down into the darkness. And as his body disappeared into the void, the whisper began again in his ears, quiet, distant, and eerily familiar. You're not the first, Jackson, and you won't be the last. Dot. Quote. Dot. From that day on, Jackson was never seen again. The barn continued to stand in its place, a reminder that some secrets are better left alone. The villagers no longer talked about that place.